Hello and thank you so much for joining us on this week's News In-Depth program. I'm your presenter, Pennifa Nyirenda. On today's program, we'll be looking at the dairy industry in Zambia. We'll be analysing the performance of this particular sector, as well as trying to establish the interests of those linked to this sector. We'll be taking you to Ngwerere to meet a small-scale dairy farmer, as well as the processing companies as we meet them in terms of understanding their interests when it comes to production. We'll also be getting government's policy position when it comes to growing this sector. Stay tuned to this week's News in Depth program. Milk is an important source of nutrients such as carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, fat and protein. While the nutritional value of milk stands out in most conversations, it is also a money-spinning product. This is because milk is the spine of the dairy industry. Countries like India, the United States of America and New Zealand stand out in global trade as they rake in millions of dollars from their thriving dairy industries. Regrettably, Zambia has not seized this opportunity.
I think in terms of representing a percentage of economic development, in kwacha value, it may not be that big. Its value is really in the area of food security. Remember, the dairy industry means you have a cow which at some point becomes beef when it stops producing milk. So in terms of human well-being, I think the dairy industry is extremely significant. In terms of can it compete with copper, can it compete with cement, can it compete? It probably doesn't compete. The dairy industry is very much a domestic industry.
The slow growth of the dairy industry has been attributed to the low milk consumption pattern by most Zambians.
The dairy industry is very subjective to culture. If you look at Western countries, New Zealand, Australia, North America, Europe, cheese and dairy products are a significant part of their diets. In Zambia, in Africa, we almost only look at milk and maybe butter. But you know, we're all margarine eating people, so butter is like a luxury.
The low levels of milk intake have been affirmed by the Dairy Association of Zambia, an organization which oversees the interests of different players in the industry, from farmers, input suppliers to processors.
We need to do a lot more to encourage people to drink a lot more of the milk. It's much more nutritious. It gives better value than most of the fizzy drinks that we opt for. If one wants to stay healthy, drink milk, and you will stay healthy.
While the consumption levels of milk remain low, Zambia also has a milk supply deficit. Official data indicates that national milk production stands at about 463 million litres annually, while demand is well over 500 million litres per year.
Current demand is about 560 million litres per year. The deficit is mainly through importation of UHT milk and powdered milk from countries such as South Africa. Imported milk is slightly cheaper than local produced milk, and per capita consumption annually is about 28 litres, far below World Health Organization recommendation of 200 litres of milk per capita per annum.
With the noted imbalances in the dairy sector, interest would perhaps be immediately channeled to establishing the factors hindering its growth. Dairy Association of Zambia chairperson Miriam Bazima gave us an overview of the major challenges limiting the growth of this potentially viable sector. She highlighted infrastructure limitations, which include the poor road network that make it difficult for farmers, especially in rural areas, to access the market, as well as the milk collection centers.
Road networks in certain rural areas still remains to be a challenge. The government, yes, we must acknowledge that they've been working very hard to, try and put up road infrastructure. in most of the rural areas to encourage such development, but there are still feeder roads, there are still access roads which are a big challenge. And because the milk collection centers are distances apart, farmers find it very difficult to collect their milk, to milk their animals, take their milk to the collection centers. Some of them have got to cover 60 kilometers to get to where the center is. That's just taking the milk, and they need to get back to their stations.
The cost of feed and feed ingredients is another source of concern.
We still have challenges in the cost of feed and feed ingredients. Over the past 5 months, for instance, the maize bran, which tends to be a contentional issue when we talk about it as dairy farmers, you find that the price of maize bran has skyrocketed. It's 3 times the price that it used to be. A bag of 25 kg bran is now costing around 42 kwacha?
45.
And when you're talking of a small-scale farmer, whose price of milk is another issue, because they've been complaining that they haven't, seen major increase in the price of milk despite the ingredients going up, can hardly afford that bag of bran. We have the issue of cotton cake. Most of the cotton cake produced locally is being exported.
Difficulties in accessing animal feed is a real-life experience for Christopher Habenzu, an emerging dairy farmer in Ngwerere area located in the outskirts of Lusaka.
In terms of the concentrates, which will be, basically, the proteins, the starch, carbohydrate, and so on and so forth, in various forms, which sometimes are not readily available on the market. We also have a very big challenge for the peri-urban farmer who is operating on a smallholder like this, in terms of grasses of fodder. You can imagine that for 7 to 8 months, it's a dry season in this country, and the animals have to eat grass every day, and a huge amount, more than 60% of that should be grass in its diet. Now, if you have to do that, now bulking up, your nutrition, you have to make sure that you have access to grass. Now, where do you get the grass? And you walk around and you'll see that, in fact, it's a semi-desert. So we have to buy this from outside, and in a number of times we actually don't even have access to that, because it's produced by farmers who also have their own primary needs for the grass. So, and we buy the excess.
Mr. Habenzu started his dairy business in 2008 with only 2 animals, although at the time he didn't realize their profitability. Nearly 4 years later, retirement from formal employment made Mr. Habenzu appreciate the value of the dairy animals in his possession. The business has since become his full-time job and now stands as his major source of livelihood. Mr. Habenzu's herd has since increased, and so has the milk production.
From the 2 animals that we started with, right now we have over 60 animals. We've grown over time, but we also had some purchases along the way to boost the numbers. And of course, they also have a lifespan. So some of them fall out, others come in, and yes, we are there. And we, in terms of the milk production, we have been able to hit a maximum of about 550 liters per day.
It is the impressive stories, though challenging experience, of small-scale farmers like Mr. Habenzu that have been recognized for contributing to the growth of the dairy industry.
We've seen a lot of small-scale farmers come on board. We've seen those that were initially small graduate to becoming emergent farmers and eventually commercial farmers. So when we are talking of the farmers, we are talking of the category of 3 groups: the small, emergent, and large. Those form the basis of the producers.
The small and emerging dairy farmers' contribution to the overall growth of the business has been affected by a myriad of factors.
We must admit that as a nation, we didn't invest in energy over the last 30, 40 years, but that does not mean we can't start now. We should start now. The dairy industry, as you are aware, is an industry which is very susceptible to damage. It's a perishable and a very quickly perishable product. If you took milk and left it out for 1 hour, it would go sour. And that is basically how important it is that your electricity should be functional so that you can keep the milk cold and cool and make sure that your product is not being ruined.
In addition, inadequate water supply, climatic changes affecting the growth of grass required to feed the dairy animals, as well as access to finance, also made it on the list of challenges the Dairy Association has compiled. Emphasis has also been made on the need for the regulation of exports of feed and feed ingredients.
Right now, most farmers are not making money. The price of raw milk is lower than the cost of production, because the farmers now require a price of not less than of somewhere between 4 kwacha 8 ngwe to 5 kwacha to make money. Yeah, so if the regulation of export can be improved or stepped up, so that we have readily available maize bran and cotton cake, so that because of the good supply, probably the price can begin to come down, then farmers will make a bit of money.
However, government, through the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, indicates that it is aware of the high cost of production dairy farmers have been subjected to in the area of feed and feed ingredients.
As government, it's been very, very difficult, because what's happening is that, most of our maize bran is being exported, outside the country. And you would find that, the producers, do hold on, to the maize bran, or they push up the price and making it difficult, for the small scale farmers, to access that maize bran. But what we are doing as government, is to try and see that, we can actually put up a ban, so that you can first of all satisfy the local market before we can actually think of exporting the maize bran. I think by so doing, we'll be helping the small scale farmers, and our milk production will probably go up if we do that. At times, people say, we don't have maize bran, and if you went around, not that, I'm accusing the producers, but you might find that, they're stockpiling these maize bran in their sheds, in readiness for this maize bran, to be exported to neighboring countries. And I think as government, we are discouraging that. For us to meet the demands of production of milk, I think we need to look into it, to see to it that, the maize bran is locally available, for the small scale farmers, and also that, it's given at affordable prices, to our local scale farmers.
Much as the dairy sector presents an unimpressive picture with the many difficulties it is facing, the industry is seen to have registered notable growth in the last few years. This is evident in the increased number of farmers and the dairy animal population.
For the farmers themselves, we now stand at 6,000. In terms of the animals, dedicated to dairy, we are talking of 20,000 animals in the country. Though we have quite a large chunk using the traditional animals, yes, which have not been accounted in the 20, because these are usually beef animals, so we don't account them as dairy animals. Yes. So there's been tremendous progress. The industry has been growing, and we've seen the ratio of growth is standing at between 7 and 10% every year.
The growth of the industry is acknowledged by other industry players.
I think for the past 20 years that Parmalat has been here, we have seen the dairy industry grow. We started with very smaller volumes, say 18 million liters per annum. which we have seen over the years grow up to close to 34 million liters per annum. So indeed, the industry is growing, though of course there are challenges that the industry is faced with.
The dairy industry, as you know, is one of the sectors of agriculture in Zambia. Each time in Zambia people talk about cropping, the dairy industry has grown between 5 to 10% in the last so many years, and the production capacity at the moment is about 450 million liters of milk per day. Yeah, so of that 450 million liters of milk produced per year, we only have about 35% of it processed, showing you that the industry is growing. Production has grown by 5 to 10% for the last so many years, but we still have capacity to invest in value addition and processing. Imagine 65% of the milk that is produced, of that 450 million per year, is not processed. And that gives a lot of opportunities and potential for growth.
Like any other product value chain, milk has opportunities for value addition, which in turn enhances its worth and ultimately profitability for investors. The Zambian dairy processing industry is dominated by 3 large-scale processing firms who share the available market in various proportions. We visited the Huntley farm, the dairy division run by Zambeef Products PLC, located in Chisamba in the central province of Zambia, where milk and milk byproducts are processed. Here, the company notes that it has invested colossal amounts of financial resources with a view to increase milk production in the country. Of significant interest to us was the investment the firm has made in new technology facilitating production of milk byproducts that include fermented milk, also known as sour milk, cheese, yogurt, and milk juices.
In the last 3-4 years, we have invested about $3 million in a modern milk plant. This plant moved our capacity from about 30,000 to the 100,000 installed capacity now.
The company recently installed a new piece of equipment in the processing of pasteurized milk to enhance its production capacity.
This is a 10,000 liter pasteurizing plant. So our raw milk from the dairy farm, when it comes in, once we check its quality, we process it, we pasteurize it into all the various dairy products that are on the market for Zambia.
Similar investments in new forms of technology targeted at meeting the needs of modern-day dairy production have been made by Parmalat, a company that has been in the dairy business in Zambia for 20 years.
A very strong commitment for investing in Zambia, and that goes way back to 1998 when Parmalat came here. They invested in the long life machine, it's a Tetra Pak machine, and from that point on we have invested in the packaging machine. We have also gone further to invest in the distribution and also source utilities. For example, we bought gensets in the light of the load shedding that we are currently experiencing, not only for ourselves but also for the milk collection centers. These are cooperatives where small-scale farmers take their milk for cooling.
Regrettably, the large-scale investments made by the 2 processing companies we visited are being underutilized.
Our installed capacity is about 100,000 liters that we can process for our dairy plant. You can see the gap between 35 and 100,000. We have got 65,000 liters of capacity yawning. So what we are trying to say here is that the potential for the small-scale farmers to grow and to supply into our milk plant is very high and is yawning. Yeah, so you can see our installed capacity versus the actual processing capacity at the moment. There's a big deficiency that needs to be filled up.
From our collection point of view, we collect roughly about 2 million liters per month, and from that 2 million, about 1/3, which is 33% of the 2 million, is milk contributed by the small-scale farmers. Yes. The remainder of the 2/3 is milk that is coming from our commercial farmers. So clearly you can see that the number of small scalers is huge, but the volume they are doing is still small.
In bridging the milk supply deficit, Zambia has also invested in a dairy farm which currently has 1,500 animals, producing 37,500 litres of milk collected through its mechanized milking parlour. However, this is still not enough. On the other hand, government feels that the processing companies can help the dairy farmers grow their businesses if they paid a better price for the milk they purchase.
But if we have to promote the small-scale farmers, I think the prices that the small-scale farmers are paid, for the production of milk that they're producing, I think should be looked into seriously so that, they can be able actually to try and compete, with the commercial farmers. Because you find that, the production cost of a small-scale farmer compared to a commercial farmer, you find that a small-scale farmer's production, it's a bit expensive than a commercial farmer. So I think we need to help the small-scale farmers, in order for us to up the production of milk.
Nevertheless, the processing firms have intervened in the needs of the small-scale farmers.
Our milk plant is in here, Chisamba, okay? It's strategically placed. Why? This is a farming area. Our model is such that it gives opportunities to the small, medium, and commercial farmers. So we are supporting all these, sectors of the farming, grades. So we're getting milk from the commercial farmers, we're getting milk from the what you call the emergent farmers, and we're getting milk from the small-scale farmers.
It is part of our policy to collect milk from the farmers. We have a fleet of tankers that actually go all the way to the furthest remote areas that you can think of. For example, Namwala, Zimba, Mtanda in Solwezi, Serenje in Mkushi.
Much as the dairy industry has prevailing deficits in supply and production, opportunities for exports exist.
And I think we can export, and especially the fact that we have got 8 neighboring countries. It means any kind of dairy production along the borders with these countries offers a better market in the neighboring countries than even in Zambia.
Government too is optimistic that exports are a possibility, but the ministry emphasizes that the local market needs to be satisfied first.
Before we can actually start exporting in Zambia, I think we should actually see to it that, we meet our demand. But though we've got companies like Parmalat, that are exporting milk, to neighboring countries, like Congo, DRC, I think Zimbabwe, and other neighboring countries. But we still got a deficit, in our own production. And I think the levels of export that we're exporting, I think, are not as huge as we would actually like to do that. If, as I said earlier on, probably if we can change on the genetics of our animals to be producing more milk and meet our local demand, I think, exporting of milk will be also one other way, of earning forex, and then we can start exporting milk to our neighboring countries.
Nampak manufactures packaging materials that are being used by most dairy companies operating in the country, and they too have observed the growth of the dairy business in Zambia.
I think it's very significant. I think there's been a tremendous amount of growth, particularly in the fresh milk side of the dairy. Zambia is no different from the rest of the world. Everyone's more health conscious than they used to be previously. Fresh milk is obviously a great product. It's got to be packaged properly. It's got to be made available. So we are very encouraged. We see a tremendous amount of growth in the dairy industry. Obviously, we want to be there to support them in that. We think it's logical that there will be growth in the fresh milk and other forms of milk. UHT, there's a huge market for that, particularly in the outlying areas where it's got a longer life than the fresh dairy. And I think as the economy expands and as the nation grows, there's going to be more consumption of milk. It's the whole supply chain. Farmers have got to do the dairy to produce the milk. Somebody's got to provide the packaging to put it in, and somebody's got to process it. So we're very encouraged and very committed to supporting the dairy industry.
In supplementing the development of the dairy business industry, NAMPAC has equally devised techniques to prevent members of the public from consuming contaminated products.
We have automated the plants to remove human interaction with our products, so that at the end we attain the quality assured bottle in terms of contamination and the contamination, just the quality of the bottle. When I take you through the process on how we do manufacture our product.
The Dairy Association is of the view that more young people should get into the dairy business while appealing to the state to improve milk collection infrastructure.
I would like to encourage the youth, especially because they tend to think farming is for the older, farming is for the young and energetic. I would like to encourage my fellow women out there to become maybe self-reliant, so to speak, by participating in the dairy sector.
For the Ministry of Livestock, the vision is to attain dairy production self-sufficiency before 2030. The Dairy Development Act of 1931 was only revised in 2010 with a view to grow the industry. Following the revision of the Act, the major expectation is the creation of the Dairy Development Board, a body which is expected to help organize the industry further. Government says the formulation of the board has reached an advanced stage.
I think we are heading in the right direction because, emphasis have really been put, on the fisheries and the livestock sector, to see how we can actually up our production, on our beef, milk, and the fisheries. So I think we're in the right direction, and I think we'll get there. We are just hoping, by 2030, we should be able, to produce enough milk of our own in this country.
The dairy industry has immense opportunities that can contribute to the diversification drive being championed in the Zambian economy. The sector, through empowerment of farmers and ultimately industrialization, can facilitate social and economic development if well harnessed. Here is where we end this week's News In-Depth program, as we were looking at the performance of the dairy industry. We do hope the program was informative. We urge you to join us next week for another interesting News In-Depth presentation. I've been your presenter, Pennifa Nyirenda. Goodbye and God bless you.